Hello and welcome to Business World and to the second of our special reports from the China-Britain Business Conference.
Tonight, we take a more detailed look at the discussions of the day and the conclusions they reached.
The conference has been organised to address the key issues the business wishing to enter the Chinese market will encounter, but also to bridge the very different commercial, regulatory and cultural environments of the partner countries.
The China-Britain Business Council is the government organisation to which it outsources its responsibility for promoting trade with China, outwards, exports, inwards investment in both directions, and imports. And for that we are given a grant by United Kingdom Trade and Investment, and we get fees for work we do on behalf of British industry at the request of UK Trade and Investment in giving market intelligence services reports, which we do in China and here.
The opening session of the conference laid out the stall of the concerns and challenges of trade with China from a British perspective.
One of the things we want to think about this morning is the implications of the huge demographic movements on opportunities essentially for the UK to collaborate with China. Healthcare, employment, education, all aspects of the developing societal development have got serious opportunity there for us to capitalise on. So I've also been asked to say a little bit about Arup, my company, and the way that we have developed and moved into China. So I'm going to do that quickly first. You never quite know where to start with Arup because some people know us extremely well or they know us for one part of our practice. We effectively design and develop anything to do with the built environment, whether it's rail infrastructure, bridges, Stonecutters Bridge up in Hong Kong there, Terminal 5 at Heathrow, Pompidou, Sydney Opera House, all our projects way back in history. We've got some 11,000 technical staff around the world, 93 offices, and this year we'll turn over about just over £1 billion, which isn't bad for a professional services firm. We're the sort of John Lewis of the consulting world. We're actually owned by a trust which benefits the employees, which has been an extremely successful model for us. We're over 60 years old and Arup started a small office where the post office tower is now, and we sort of centralise our activities in London around that area.
Sustainable lifestyle in the new community and how to facilitate that. That's what is urbanization about. It's about the people, because people, they are the key drivers. They can generate the growth of the economy, and then the urbanization is how to provide a healthy and a better lifestyle for everybody. In the next urbanization process in China, actually the key focus will be on small and medium-sized cities. If we look about overall Chinese cities, at the moment there are about 660 cities in China generally. The mega cities, we talk about Beijing, Shanghai, and extra large cities, like lots of capital cities for different provinces, they only counted as a very small number. The majority of the cities are medium-sized and small-sized cities, which they count about 500 plus. And also these cities, not including the capital cities of little county towns like Xiancheng. So overall, it will be about something like 3,500 plus small and medium-sized cities to be developed in the next 20, 30 years' time. But when we talk about these cities, they are well located in urban-rural integrated areas. So the next generation of urbanization in China is really about urban-rural integrated development, how we can provide a safe food product and also provide housing for these people and how to provide a good education system, create new jobs, and provide the healthcare and the welfare system, and also look after the cultural heritage, and also provide enough leisure facility for people to enjoy and to relax. And also about the vernacular of the cultural, because China is a vast country, there's a rich vernacular cultural and architectural design in there, how to keep this and then develop further to make sure actually each city have their own identity, and also each city sits within a beautiful natural environment. And also, of course, the basic urban infrastructure and also the long-term management of the city are the key things need to be considered. History always repeats. If we look back 100 years ago, actually UK, the primary challenges in the UK's urbanization process were urban sprawl and pollution, which are rather similar issues as China facing at the moment. And the UK has been planning and establishing comprehensive planned new communities over a century. So there are lots of relevant experiments we can borrow from we can kind of exchange between the two countries. For example, the National Trust for Place of Historical Interest and Natural Beauty was incorporated in 1894. The Garden City movement was initiated by Howard in 1898. At the time, when he invented the idea, he said, UK or England have very beautiful countryside, but also the large cities, they are rather polluted and provide very bad housing environment for people who work there. Why can't we provide the renewable energy and sustainable energy, information technology, and low carbon transportation to make the city a 21st most advanced technology city?
For those of you who don't know BRE, just a very quick background about who we are. You know, we are over 90 years old. We were part of the government, setting policy, standards, regulations. But in 1997, we were privatized. It's quite a good reflection. We had an interesting conversation about how things have changed and has it been good for us? Has it been good for BRE? Well, lots of pros and cons, but we've changed and we've grown as an organization. And we now have an international outreach. You know, a lot of the work that we do has a real international and is relevant across the world, and we're working with partners on a whole range of areas around fundamental research, but also informing the country's own standards and regulations and policy. So that's a bit about us. You know, we've grown our activities. A key part of that growth has revolved around our environmental standard, BREEAM, and BREEAM stands for BRE's Environmental Assessment Method. It is an international standard now and adopted in countries, over 50 countries around the world. And there it looks at a number of factors: management, energy, water, waste, ecology. There are all these criteria, and what it does is it has a methodology that helps you to compare each of those criteria that allow individuals and clients, developers to make decisions on their own sites on the environmental and sustainability of their sites. So that's a standard that we use on our projects around the world. Part of the challenge of setting new standards is, as you push the boundaries, you're always then really looking to adopt and bring in new innovations. And that's new innovations in products, technologies, design, process, a whole range, a whole facet of innovations that need to really be introduced in the right way to achieve these higher performance standards, environmental standards. And at BRE in Watford, we have some of the most advanced technologies that you'll see anywhere in the world. You know, these are some of the most leading edge buildings that we've built with partners to really test the limit of our understanding of environmental design and technologies. And I dare say every one of those buildings has failed in different ways. We've learned a huge amount. And I use that word failure very carefully because we are a research-based organization, so we test and push it to the limit. And part of that learning is then put back into guidance and regulations and standards so that when we're then developing on real developments, we're better prepared so that we don't make those mistakes on a prototype research park. So The park is a key part of our activities to really understand environmental design and take that to not just the UK but around the world. And we are, just very quickly, setting up innovation parks across the world, working with countries and partners and stakeholders in those areas. Our story with China really has come about following the visit by the then Vice Premier, Li Keqiang. And he visited in January 2011 our site in Watford. And originally we only had 40 minutes with him. You know, we were told very strictly by his private office, you got 40 minutes, and the Vice Premier has to go to the airport, and literally was flying by private jet back to China. In the end, he actually stayed for nearly, well, just over 3.5 hours, and he was just wowed by the level of innovation, the quality of construction, and how British companies have been able to innovate and deliver this level of performance. And he wanted to understand how we're creating this and how that could be adopted and taken to China. Now, he was very explicit that China will have its own standards and policies, but how can the UK and British companies help to inform China's development and standards? So that was a key request. Following his visit, we were again honoured to have the Chinese ambassador visit us twice. And he actually said that's the first time he's ever visited any place twice, which is great. And we had a much more detailed discussion about, well, how do we take this forward? And how do we really help China with its huge urbanization and growth plan and deliver that in a more sustainable, more environmental way?
I'd actually like to start with my conclusion. So if you don't listen to anything else in my little speech, listen to the next 1 minute and you'll get the whole thing. But quite seriously, there's two parts really to this. First of all, as you all know, urbanization is a complex and multi-layered public policy issue. And there's not going to be any magic pill, so to speak, to address the various challenges that it faces, that it presents, or in fact, ensures we realize on the opportunities that arise from urbanization. Instead, it really will require a variety of skills and capabilities from a number of different sources. So we think that AstraZeneca really has a role to play to help ensure that an increasing percentage of this urbanizing Chinese population has better access to better health care. And for us, it's not as simple as reducing the price of medicines. If it were, lots of other people would have done that, presumably by now. We really think, in the same way that obviously BRE and others think, that it's about understanding the local challenges and then structuring our business to provide co-created solutions, very much the theme of the previous speaker, in response to those, all with a longer-term view. That's really the crux of our approach. And by doing that, or frankly anyone who does that, we feel positions themselves well for becoming a key partner or collaborator with the government, and in our case in particular as the CCP looks to bring forward universal health coverage reforms as part of the 5-year plan. And of course we also share a mutual long-term interest in growing the health and wealth of the Chinese population. Second, for AstraZeneca, China is not just a marketplace. It's not just an exporter. For us, it's a regional hub, center of the entire Asia-Pacific region. It's a global center. It's an integral part of our multinational commerce. In fact, the scope and diversity of our business in China, which ranges from bench research, research collaborations, through manufacturing, and ultimately to the commercial and regulatory side, is the same full value chain that you would find if you're looking at the United States business or the business here in the United Kingdom. We no longer speak even of being in China for China. In fact, what we say is we're in China for global. There are strong fundamentals throughout the country that will fuel growing demand for healthcare. And we think that they are quite similar to those we face in just about any developed or developing market, namely they arise out of an accelerated aging of our population. But for China in particular, they also include an expanded middle class and a growing affluence of the population, as well as those emerging small to mid-sized cities.
The opportunity I wanted to talk about was really not so much higher education as the opportunity, but more higher education as a catalyst for opportunity. And some of it draws on experience from building campuses in China, but also operating more broadly in that space. And it's about access to education as maybe in the same sense as a luxury good, although hopefully subject to somewhat lower levels of taxation. And the consequences of the growth in the middle classes, increasing affluence and increasing appetite for a Western-style education, particularly from an elite university as a marker of differentiation and clearly as one of the enabling tools that lets the new mega corporations that are coming out of China to think about internationalizing, to think about overseas acquisitions, and all of those things that are going to take them on to their next stage of development. And so it's no surprise, I guess, that several Western institutions have gone in, have franchised programs, have set up joint laboratories, joint institutes, and in some cases, things that are called universities. And I just wanted to mention one of those, and this was one of two that were created in 2006 when the Ministry of Education, for a brief period, relaxed its rules on investment by overseas higher education providers. And there were two joint venture campuses established, Liverpool Shan Jiaotong and Nottingham Ningbo. And this one is somewhat different in that whilst it's a JV, it's actually a JV with a commercial company. And so in terms of its academic provision, it's a freestanding private university. And by most metrics, a pretty successful one, having grown over 7 years to 5,500 students, a turnover around about 300 million RMB, and in many senses everything that a university ought to be in terms of educating undergraduates, educating postgraduates, pursuing research and pursuing technology transfer to local businesses and national businesses. And I think the signal that sent to the Chinese government about long-term commitment from the UK education sector has been quite a powerful one. But it's also been quite powerful in reinventing what was a pretty traditional, pretty middle-ranking UK institution. And I would guess that many of your organisations out there who've gone into Asia with both feet, in a sense, would find that that's probably been equally transformational in your own businesses.
VSO is the world's largest charity, independent charity, focusing on poverty using volunteers. And it's been in existence for about 50 years and operates in about 90 countries, of which one is China. And we've been in China for about 30 years. And we've seen quite a dramatic period of change, more, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. Change has started to take place at a pace, and we can sense it, and hopefully that will come across in what I'm going to talk about. China historically has not been great at publishing information, but we would take comfort that information is starting to flow out of China in terms of how they kind of measure the inequality between the haves and the have-nots. Urban poor, there's probably more than 100 million people on less than $1 a day. And that was very much our focus and a lot of other NGOs' focus in the early years in terms of both health and education. But we're moving away from that because the Chinese government want to focus more on that themselves. So what's actually happened? The earthquake in 2008 created the impetus for change in the using of people other than the military, other than the police force. Premier Wen Jiabao went down to Sichuan and goaded all these volunteers in, and the volunteers were seen to be doing a good job, but also there was a kind of how can we help our fellow man? And that engendered, obviously, into the Beijing Olympics and also the Shanghai Expo. So from those early starts, we've actually seen quite a marked change in attitude. And that, of course, is reflected in the 12th five-year plan, where they're saying 10% of the population have got to be volunteers by 2015. That's approximately 140 million people. Well, from our understanding where we are now, I think the percentage is probably about 3% achieved in China, and in terms of Beijing, that's more like 10%. But that's quite a challenge.
The China consumption story is incredibly compelling, but it's also ever evolving. And understanding what makes Chinese consumers tick is far from simple. And now I'm not going to stand here and say that I have the definitive answers for you today, but at China Confidential, we survey now almost 4,000 consumers nationwide every quarter. And we also conduct research from first-tier cities right down to rural townships. And this enables us to build up a pretty detailed picture of consumer habits and also to identify key trends. First trend that I'd like to talk about is the rise of mid-range consumption. So over the past decade, I'd say that from the outsider's perspective at least, the Chinese consumer narrative has been dominated by sort of luxury at one end of the spectrum and by sort of mass market goods, servicing China's vast population at the other. What we're seeing increasingly is that the luxury spending story in China is far from over, as I'm sure that my fellow panelists will sort of go into in a lot more detail shortly. But growth rates are slowing, and official clampdowns on corruption, on gift giving, are having a negative impact. Perhaps it's short term, but it's nevertheless noticeable. Meanwhile, what we're also seeing is that sort of ongoing reforms, rising wages, and increasing confidence is continuing to boost spending by middle-income consumers. And we see this clearly in our survey data. So as this slide shows, if you look at the red line here represents spending growth by middle-income consumers. We're defining that as between 10 and 20,000 pounds a year in terms of annual household income. And what you see in February is, for the first time, middle-income consumers reported higher spending growth than their higher-income counterparts. Now, this may be, there were sort of seasonal and sort of temporary factors that might be part of this, but we think this is a significant shift, and that brands targeted at aspirational middle earners at this red line group are extremely well positioned to continue to post strong sales growth in 2013.
CKGSB is the only independent business school in China, and we have offices in New York and London. In our London office is just right across the street on St. James Square. Our goal is to deliver new knowledge, develop new knowledge on the rise of China and the implications on global economy. And we also want to bring the business elite network to the UK, to the US. We really want to build a truly global learning platform among the business elites. Now, as a professor, I really enjoy the freedom of asking questions. So my first question to the audience is, can you name two third and fourth tier cities? Any try? Dalian? Ningbo? Yeah, good ones. Okay, my second question. Have you heard about Taobao? If you can raise your hands. Okay, that's great. That's the biggest kind of online shopping network. It's a combination of Amazon and eBay. How about WeChat? WeChat. Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's very, very popular among Chinese young people. It has the best features from all the social media technologies.
So in social technology, e-commerce, Chinese companies are quite innovative. So, and social media is huge in China. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the branding strategies in China. So China is interesting, China is exciting. The reason is that China is changing. But change always imposes new challenges to the companies who want to be in China and be successful in China. So the current customer trends are very interesting. So the first is that before, the customer are quite uniform, but now there are so many segments of consumers are coming up. You really need diversified branding strategies. So now we have the rising middle class. They want to show their social status. They want to spend lots of income on education. They want to be better. Women make decisions. Now the government is banning the corporate gifting. Now social gifting is going to be more important. Another important trend is that the taste for luxury goods are maturing with surprising speed. The ultra-rich people, they want individualism. They want to have emotional connection with the luxury brands. And there's a huge demand for services like healthcare, insurance, financial services. The challenge is that you need to have a deep understanding of customer psychology and the consumer needs. So that's something good for British companies because they are good at providing services, but you need to really understand consumer psychologies. Consumers are very experienced, lots of impulse purchase. So in-store experience become increasingly important. How do I build the retail store? How do I make them purchase? So, and another thing is that consumers are exposed to hundreds of brands from the globe every day. They're notoriously savvy, notoriously known for being deal savvy, and they're not brand loyal at all. How to build brand loyalty. So volume is not important. Building brand loyalty is more important. And everybody knows that let's go to third-tier and fourth-tier cities. Lots of opportunities. But wait a second. It's not that easy. The road is bumpy because you saw lots of big malls opened in third-tier, fourth-tier cities, but they are empty because the income is not at that level yet. And people need to be educated about the nature and the content of the foreign brands. First-tier cities, there are still opportunities. It's saturated, but the opportunities only lies on innovation. You have to produce new products that tailor to the local taste to capture those demands. And another important tangible shift is that Chinese consumers are now, they want to buy made-in-China products. All the 50 powerful brands is going to take a big chunk of the market share. And also outgoing purchasing power, which is called packing pounds. So that means that your branding strategy should not be a China strategy. It should be a global strategy because Chinese consumers are coming out. Now, one thing is that people notice that the consumption is increasing by 60% every year. However, only 20% were captured by the multinationals.
That's just about all for this week, but let's take a quick look at what is also to come in the next few weeks on Business World.
The franchise show came to London and Julie was there to examine how franchises work and how they can be a point of entry for a business brand to China or Britain.
We'll have coverage of the Education Technology Trade Fair showing how technology can make learning a lifelong process.
And to internalise or not, how best to develop the RMB internationally despite the crisis of the Eurozone.
And we were also at the London Travel Show, looking at what opportunities there are for inward-outward bound travel between Britain and China.
And in a regular slot dedicated to publishing, we'll be putting some of the business books on the market under the microscope in Bookwise, including crime writer and economist Paul French.
All of that and more in coming future weeks, so set your TiVos and series link as on Sky Plus to make sure you don't miss it.
That's all from Business World for this week. Thank you for joining us, but remember, Business World premieres every Monday at 7 p.m. on Propeller TV.
Sky 189 and online.
Goodbye.